Labor Talks, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Hello, and welcome to Labor Talks. Today's special guest is Mary Hoeft, and Mary is currently running for the U.S. Congress against Sean Duffy. Welcome to Labor Talks,
Oh,
Mary.
it is my pleasure, Laurie.
We want to make sure the viewing audience gets to know who you are. So tell them a little bit about you.
A little bit about me. I teach at the University of Wisconsin Barron County campus in Rice Lake. I've taught there for 45 years. I'm a professor of communication arts and French. And that little
What? Mais oui.
Mais oui. And that little university is a gem. Your listeners probably know that the UW Colleges is the lowest tuition in the state. I think I've chaired the appointments committee for a good 20 years, and our number one thing we're looking for in our teachers, the number one thing is they're great teachers who love being in the classroom. So it's an amazing opportunity for our students. So proud that I've had that opportunity. I am a mother to two children. My daughter Kelly is a police officer in Madison, and my son Ryan died in 2001. He was an officer with the St. Louis Park Police Department.
I'm sorry to hear that. Especially with all the things going on right now in the Twin Cities with the...
I think we'll talk about that a little later. I hope so.
I know you've been fighting for restorative justice programs. Can you explain what those are?
Well, I can, and I guess I'd first like to explain why. I teach a course at the university, an upper level course. We offer a 4-year degree, and it's called Creativity and Problem Solving. And part 2 of that course is we look at incarceration in the state of Wisconsin, mass incarceration, overflowing prisons. And students, their task is to try to find a viable alternative. And because we're incarcerating the mentally ill, we're incarcerating first-time juvenile offenders, we're incarcerating a lot of people who belong there, absolutely. But we're doing it at a great cost to our taxpayers, $32,000 a year at a minimum. And so are there viable alternatives? And yes. Barron County Restorative Justice Programs is that viable alternative. I've been in it since its inception 20 years ago, when a magnificent judge, Ed Bruner, decided in Barron County, said, a lot of people are being incarcerated who should not be. What's an alternative? And he started this program. And I've been ground floor, and I've been a victim offender facilitator. It's now called Restorative Conference Facilitator, because sometimes it's difficult to see who's the victim, who's the offender. But what I've done for years, is bring a victim face to face with the offender, if they're willing. The victim has to want this. Mm-hmm. But the victim is empowered to tell the offender how this crime impacted them, what they want to be made whole again, and then the offender says, I'm willing to do that, or I'm not. If they're not willing to do it, then they go right back into the system. Those offenders are referred to us through police officers who think maybe they shouldn't go through the system, or a district attorney, or a judge who says, no, not this person. Usually they're first-time juvenile offenders who are going to be well served. I got 2 examples, and I hope we have time for that. One of the examples is a young man threw a Coke can out of the car, smashed the window of the car that was driving in this direction. That man felt his whole family was in danger. Furious, charges filed, turned the car around, went after the young man, charges filed. Well, that case was referred to restorative justice, but the victim wasn't interested. He said, Mary, I'm not interested. I want that kid behind bars. So I talked to him and I said, I've met that young man. I think you might feel differently if you talk to him. And he called me back about a week later and he said, all right, I'll give it a try. So he told the young man how the crime impacted him, how he feared for the lives of his family members, and what he wanted, the repair for the car window. But then he listened to the young man. The young man who was very sorry and who said, I wasn't thinking, and it was careless, and I just tossed it out the window. I wasn't thinking. And sir, I would be happy to repay for that window, but I don't have a job. I don't have a car. I don't know how I'm going to do it. So that victim called a halt to the meeting, and he asked me to step outside. And he said to me, Mary, I feel for him. Would it be inappropriate if I offered him a job at my company? And I said, well, no, it would be very appropriate if that's something that you feel you want to do. So he came back in, he offered the young man a job, and the young man took that job. And to me, that's what restorative justice is about. That victim felt whole again. That victim felt good about the young man and about what he had done. And it saved taxpayers the cost of incarceration. That young man might not have gone to prison, but probably would have spent quite a bit of time in jail for that offense. And then one more story that will help the listeners really understand, I think, what the program is about. A young woman bought a beautiful new snowmobile, an $8,000 snowmobile, brand new. She takes it, parks it outside of a building. She's not going to be in there that long, and left the keys in the snowmobile. The young man comes along, sees the beautiful snowmobile and the keys, steals it. Then gets 3 of his buddies to help him hide it at a grandma's house. They're found. They're all facing felony charges. $8,000 machine, all facing felony charges. The officer sees all of them as first-time juvenile offenders and says, I think this is a case for restorative justice. I call the victim, and she said, no, I'm fearful. I do not want them to know my face. This is a small community. I said, I've met the young man. I've talked to them. I don't think you have a reason to be fearful. She called me back a week later, and she said, I'm going to do it. So she came in empowered. She told them how much that snowmobile meant to her. And then she looked at the 3 boys who were the accomplices, and she said, each one of you, I want 75 hours of working with my friend who's a farmer who needs help. Main offender, the thief, 150 hours from you. And the 4 of you, you put together a contract and you repay the insurance company. You figure it out how much you can pay a month. I want it paid off in a year. That insurance company is going to get paid back. So the short version of this is the 4 boys carried through on their contract. At the end of the year, they did not go to prison. And they 4 felony charges, each one faced. The main thief, maybe a couple years in prison. So taxpayers saved a tremendous amount of money. But what it did for the victim, empowering the victim, one of these young men was crying when it was done. And she said, why are you crying? And he said, my dad just died. He'd be so ashamed of me. And she wound up embracing him and saying, no, your dad would be proud of you. You have stood up, you are accountable for your crime, and you're going to do something about it.
You're right, there are a lot of first-time offenders, juveniles, that end up going to prison, and now they come out hardcore or institutionalized.
Well, they do, and they come out of prison without jobs or without vehicles, without driver's licenses, so they can get to a job. And two-thirds of those who are released from prison
reoffend,
are back in prison within 3 years. And what's that doing to our citizens? The harm that we're placed in, the harm's way we're in, because they are released, they've learned to be a lot more dangerous in prisons. They get out, they don't have the jobs, they resort to crime. I mean, and then more taxpayer dollars to incarcerate them again. So Barron County Restorative Justice Programs, I don't mean to imply that's the only program. There are many programs in our program. There are young children who are truant, kindergartners, first graders who are truant. We've got community workers who help them get to school, who make sure moms and dads understand how important it is that they're in school. Bullying programs, teen court, wonderful programs.
So they can understand But the fact that they're meeting up with the person that they've offended against, it gives them, that person, a chance to say, why? Why did you do that? And it makes them realize, like you said about the young guy with the Coke can, they don't think about their actions. And this is a way to make them think about their actions, take the consequences, instead of just flying by the seat of their pants and going on.
Oh, well, the first day of my public speaking class, students always interview me. I'm teaching them good questioning strategies, and they ask me what I do when I'm not teaching, and I talk about being a victim offender facilitator. And after that, the students introduce themselves. And one young man got up and he stood up and he pointed at me and he said, "It's because of her. It's because of Professor Hoeft that I'm sitting here in this classroom today." I kind of looked at him and I thought, do I know you? He said, "Otherwise I'd be behind bars. I'd be behind bars." He was one of those I facilitated. I didn't remember the face, and I'm glad that I didn't remember the face, but he said, well, this young man went on to become an honor student, and now he's a teacher. And no record, given that chance, wow.
And what they can do with their life. What have been the difficulties in initiating the restorative justice program?
Well, it's funding. This was a massive undertaking. So when Ed Bruner had the idea, when Judge Bruner had that idea, how do we get a program like that funded? And so thank goodness to Dave Obey, Congressman Obey, that's the position I'm vying for. He held that office for 42 years. He heard about this program and he said, it sounds exactly like what our country needs. And so he made sure that there was federal funding. So it got us started, and now we're not on our own. Now Goodwill, we don't have the federal funding, but we have Goodwill, and we have schools who have bought into it, schools that are so excited about the programs we're bringing into the schools. So we need, if I am in office, if I'm in Washington, D.C., what I will fight for is federal funding for programs like Barron County Restorative Justice programs throughout the country. Strong funding, just that initial funding to get your program started. We need to do something as an alternative to mass incarceration of juvenile first-time offenders.
I agree. Now, we mentioned this before. You are a mother of a current police officer, and you lost your son on duty. How do you see, because this is so big right now, how do you see the current situation with regards to Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter?
Yeah. Well, Black Lives Matter is a movement. It's a cry for help. It's a cry that says officers need to be well trained. It's a cry for help, and officers are listening. Police departments are listening across the country, and I would like to talk about the Madison Police Department and their chief, Mike Koval, because it's an amazing program. First of all, they make sure that their officers, when they're being trained, that their officers in the use of their service weapons right away get 40 hours of training in the use of their service weapons. That wasn't the case with my son. My son received 1 day of training in the use of his service weapon, 1 day of training, and then he was out on the road. My son is the one who died because he was insufficiently trained. It wasn't someone else, it was my son. Officers need good training in the use of their service weapons. But also, I was listening to a program this morning where someone said, officers only have a second to decide whether or not this is an instance where they need to draw their weapon and shoot. They probably have their weapon drawn at that point. They don't have a second. They have less than a second. They have portion of a second. And this is instinct. And that instinct, and this is, I'm not a police officer. I'm a university professor. This is my daughter talking to me saying, Mom, we need powerful training in the use of those weapons. Instinct is not just, what should I do? It's, I've been trained over and over and over to do it again. And so Black Lives Matter is a call to police departments across the country. And what's happening is funding is being reduced from departments, even the Madison Police Department. Madison is being reduced in their funding, and the chief is calling for more funding. You can't do this to us. But the other part of that isn't it goes beyond the training and the use of their service weapon. If they're going to shoot, should they shoot, shouldn't they shoot? It's also about that community, getting involved in the community and knowing the people of your community. And my daughter, before she had 3 little boys, she used to let me do ride-alongs with her. She worked the night shift, and I'd have my little visitor badge. But I remember going with her. It was a woman a domestic abuse case, and they thought beating on her husband. And so my daughter pounded on the door and went inside, and the woman was crazed. And my daughter knew her from 3 different occasions, and my daughter said, and I'll make up the name, she said, "Anne?" The woman had bright purple hair. She said, "Anne, is that a new hair color? It's beautiful on you." And all of that tension and anger just went out of Anne, and then it was a conversation. Yes, it's crucial that officers know the people of their beat, but my daughter says the problem is they may know the people of their beat, but when the call comes at midnight or 1 in the morning, which of the 300 officers are going to come and respond to that call? Will it be someone who knew Anne, or will it be someone who did not know Anne? And so we need funding. The federal government, again, if elected, the federal government needs to fund these community programs. So again, it's not like Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, Red Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a cause, it's a call out to our country that says, let's make sure police officers are well trained, let's make sure police officers are safe. It incorporates Blue Lives Matter, because when my daughter has to draw her weapon and, God forbid, shoot, it's done because it needed to be done to save the lives of others, not because it was an accident.
Correct. And with the drug problems that we have, all of our police departments are crying for help, for more funding, so that they can take care of this stuff and to know them. And I know our police chief spends a lot of time in the high school. He said, if these kids know who I am, they see me on the street, they're not going to be afraid of me, they'll talk to me, and they aren't going to be truant.
My daughter is on a 5-year tour of duty in the 5th grade classrooms in Madison, where she is, and this is a beautiful example, she teaches about bullying, she teaches about self-protection, and she was teaching students about touch, if they're inappropriately touched. She said, you need to find someone you trust, a mom, a dad, someone in your community, find someone you trust and tell them. As soon as she was done, one of the girls was waiting there for her, and she said, how can I help you? And the little girl was crying, and she said, I was touched inappropriately for years, and now he's touching all the other children in the daycare, and he stopped touching me because I'm too old. And from that, and boom, it went forward, and that was addressed immediately, and a long-time offender was caught because my daughter was in the classroom, and that little girl trusted her. She knew her, she trusted her. That's what we need to do. Black Lives Matter. Yes, all lives matter.
Well, and that will also turn back around and help with the restorative justice, in fact that these kids aren't going to get in as much trouble, and if they do, then they'll be more receptive to the suggestion as far as changing their lives now before they become hardcore.
Absolutely.
No, and I know Mr. Feingold, when he was here, we discussed how broadband internet changes need to be done. What changes do you feel that we need to make to our cell phone coverage, internet service here in Wisconsin? I'm in a section that it sucks. Excuse my English. It sucks. So what can
At least
we do
you didn't call that French.
No. What can we do to change that?
Well, the federal government offered the state of Wisconsin, I believe it was $23 million a few years ago, to improve it, and Governor Walker said, no thank you, no thank you. And that was our tax money that Governor Walker said, no way, And now, 4 years later, they've come up with a piecemeal plan, and it sounds like a lot of money, but to address this problem, it's not. $1.5 million a year over the next 4 years for better broadband coverage. While right now, north of Highway 8, I wonder if any of that money will go north of Highway 8, where we are, where right now people are leaving their homes and they're going to libraries, or they're standing outside of libraries
So
to
they can
do
get service.
homework or to get their internet. It's ridiculous. It's wrong. That money that the federal government gave to the state of Wisconsin was not a gift. It was our money that we have paid in taxes. Governor Walker had no right.
Just like our
From my
Medicare
limited
money
perspective.
and our train money and all the rest of the money that he's turned away from the state.
Wow. So, yes, and in terms of cell phone coverage, we need stronger towers. And if that means, I'm not aware of federal input at this point, but we need stronger towers. People's lives depend upon cell phone coverage.
I spent quite a bit of time up in Sawyer County and Bayfield, Ashland County, and besides Highway 8, you get further north, there's like a dead zone. There's just like nothing. 20 minutes north of Hayward, there might be one little spot around Cable, and then that's it. If you get off those state highways, there's nothing. And if somebody's in an emergency, what are they supposed to do?
What are we supposed to do? And it's wrong. It was wrong to turn down the money for coverage. It's wrong. I don't know what has been offered in terms of stronger terminals. I don't know that, stronger towers. So,
well, and we had a nice strong company up here, and that company was bought up by someone else, and they didn't have to sell the towers to those people because they treated the farmers who have the towers on their land. From what I understood, they weren't treated very well. So the farmers are like, this is airtime, we can sell it to anybody. So unfortunately, the nice, strong cell phone company that was up here no longer is. Oh. And the people who replaced them lost a lot of their tower and airtime. But the broadband, I mean, like I said, I live in St. Croix County, and there is a company over there that's trying. But when you can go over the river, and the slowest speeds there are 30 and 50 and faster for like next to nothing because they have all these people on fiber optics. It's so expensive to bring fiber optics in. That's why these companies are on the broadband, and I struggle to get 10.
Right.
And to be able to work from someone's home or to have a business move into that area, there's nothing to encourage them to do it if they can't get the simple, basic communication systems to be able to work.
Right, and it sounds like I can learn from you, so I need to do some serious listening to you, Laurie.
It's one of the things I've been struggling with I moved from an area where I had good cable service to an area that's like, nothing. The middle class is in trouble, okay? What steps do you feel we need to take to regain our middle class?
Well, you probably know the statistics about the state of Wisconsin. We have this dubious honor of being number one. I mean, most of us like to be number one, but not in this one. It's on the disappearance of the middle class. That's what got me into this race. I saw it happening with my students because our tuition is low. We draw a lot of students from the lower middle class, some from the working poor. But I've watched that lower middle class, I've watched it in front of my eyes disappear, where students, instead of giving their attention to full-time being university students, they're working full-time jobs as well. And people say to me, oh, just because they want a nice new car. No, because they're paying for their tuition, supporting moms and dads who are working minimum wage jobs, or moms and dads unemployed or disabled. They're putting food on the table for their siblings. So what to do about the disappearance of the middle class? We've got to get jobs back. We've got to get jobs. We've lost, since NAFTA, Wisconsin has lost 60,000 manufacturing jobs. We've got to get rid of loopholes that allow companies to export their product to Mexico. The product is added to and worked on in Mexico because the labor is cheaper, and then it's imported back into the United States at no cost. They're not the tariffs placed on it. And so they're making good money. Someone said to me, be careful talking about this issue, Mary, because our economy is doing well. I said, but at whose expense? At our workers, at our manufacturers who have lost their jobs. 60,000 in Wisconsin lost. We need to bring those jobs back by getting rid of those loopholes, those tax loopholes that allow them to take out, bring back in. And we need to make loans to small startup businesses, super low interest rates, more accessible. Yeah, has lots of
Other
ideas
things.
on jobs.
We need to talk. We need to have you back more, so we can talk more because
Thank you.
there are a lot of different things that
Oh,
we need
yes.
to do for our middle class. And my husband's one of those manufacturers, so employees, and it's terrible what's happening out there. Today's program has been, it's possible because you came to see us. So that's what I'm hoping. We may have, like I said, we may have to have you back again.
I would like that. Thank you.
And my thanks to the viewing audience and to Mary, who made today's program possible. My thanks also to the folks working behind the cameras, who not only make the show possible, but they give us a voice, an outlet for our union voices and for the labor. A final note, Labor Talks is on channel 993 twice weekly. You can also use your favorite search engine with keywords Labor Talks and CBC TV and find us on YouTube. Thanks for listening today.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.